Divorce TV with Wally Marcus. Jewish Marriage and Divorce with Rabbi Robert Eisen. Support for Divorce TV provided in part by the Center for Divorce Mediation, 520-577-1202. Greetings and welcome to Divorce TV. I'm your host, Wally Marcus. I've been a divorce mediator for over 25 years. Our topic today is Jewish marriage and divorce. My very special guest is Rabbi Robert Eisen. You can get more information about our program and our guests or contact us with questions by going to our website at the bottom of the screen. Rabbi Eisen, a real pleasure to have you with me today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
The two beards. I hope people don't get confused on who's the rabbi and who's not the rabbi. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I was born and raised in Syracuse, New York. My undergraduate education was at George Washington University and Syracuse University. I then became a rabbi in 1981. And I served as an assistant rabbi in Rochester, New York for 5 years, and then I've had pulpits in Raleigh, North Carolina, Buffalo, New York, and I've been here in Tucson. I'm now starting my 10th year at Congregation Anshe Israel.
Very good. Where's that located, by the way?
At 5th and Craycroft.
Very good. Very good. Our topic today is Jewish marriage and divorce, and I think back to my getting married 35 years ago. And I remember that when I got married, I was surprised that I was asked, would I divorce my wife? And it seemed to me a sort of an unlikely question to be asked the day I got married, but why is that?
Well, it is a tough question, and it's something which I cover in a slightly different manner with couples when I meet with them about a wedding. And it has to do with the ritual involved with a Jewish divorce, where it is the man who gives the woman the divorce. So that unless we have consent right from the beginning, that there's an understanding that if the relationship doesn't last, both parties will dissolve it with the same kind of dignity and sanctity with which it began, then there's already a problem. I try to word it a little bit differently, but I remember once going over this exact point with a couple, and the bride started crying. It looked like Niagara Falls, and I felt very bad. Afterwards, we straightened it out, and she understood. Actually, in the conservative movement, and among some Orthodox rabbis, that question has become moot through the means of what's called in the conservative ketubah or wedding contract, what's called the Lieberman Clause, which basically says...
No, that's for Senator Lieberman, isn't it?
No, not at all. Professor Lieberman from the Jewish Theological Seminary. That if either party, or if the parties decide they're going to dissolve the marriage, both parties agree to go before a Beit Din and to both give and receive a get. And in the Orthodox movement, there's some rabbis who have the couple sign prenuptial agreements. So there's a question, because then is the marriage starting with a condition, and is it really sincere? And it becomes somewhat sticky in terms of Jewish law, but it's an issue which is being wrestled with especially in today's world.
I don't know if you remember L.A. Law, which was a wonderful TV show probably 20 years ago. There was a wonderful episode where the husband refused to give the wife the divorce, and it was raining a lot in Los Angeles, and he said, if you give me the house, I'll allow you to give you the divorce. And the wonderful split screen, it says, again, divorce, the house is sliding down the hill, and he's getting the divorce. So it doesn't always work out the way you expect it.
And that's the problem, because if the husband will not give the wife a divorce, they may have a secular divorce, and then they go ahead and he'll remarry. By Jewish law, she cannot remarry unless she has that get. She becomes what's called an agunah, or a chained woman. And it's very ugly and very sad when that kind of thing happens.
I think you sort of alluded to this a little bit, but Judaism does recognize the legitimacy of divorce then.
It understands the need for it. I don't think anyone endorses it or encourages it, but in the same way that marriage is held to a high plane of sanctity, divorce is understood to do the same. In many ways, the acceptance of divorce as an unfortunate sometimes necessity or fact increases the sanctity of the marriage relationship from the very beginning.
Where is that sort of attitude derived from? It
comes from the Bible. In the book of Deuteronomy, we're taught that if there is a desire to split, then the husband is to give the woman what's called a sefer kritut, a bill of divorce. A kritut actually means cutting. A sefer kritut would be a book of cutting.
A little bit different than a bris.
Yeah, a little bit different than a bris, but actually not. Actually not, because the word bris means covenant. And when we talk about...
You can go on our website, by the way. We'll explain some of these Jewish terms too.
When we talk about a covenant, we talk about cutting a covenant. And so the same way the covenant is cut, so to speak, in the beginning, it is cut to uncut it at the end when the relationship is dissolved.
Is there? Well, it seems to me interesting. Is Jewish divorce, you think, getting more, less? How is the statistic? I mean, regular civil divorce has really peaked in about 1972 when no-fault divorce came in. It's been going down a little bit since then. Less couples are getting married, actually, so you have the never marries. But what's your sense of Jewish divorce because compared to the regular population, the rest of the population?
Well, a Jewish divorce, the ritual Jewish divorce.
Or just Jewish couples divorcing.
Yeah, well, it's contingent upon a civil divorce. I don't do, or enable the ritual for Jewish divorce to happen unless the couple is already filed in the civil divorce.
It has to be filed, but does it have to be granted? The civil divorce has to be granted first, then, or not?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's the way I do it, and most of my colleagues do the same thing.
But what about the numbers? Do you think that
the numbers? It's hard to trace. I have trouble with because people when someone divorces, what do you say? Do you say Mazel Tov, congratulations, or do you want to say I'm so sorry? And it's a little bit of both. So it's really like with a heavy heart, but also understanding and encouraging because it's a new beginning for the bride or for the woman as well to start her life over and put this part of her life behind her.
I mean, I still remember in my family that there really was a stigma. I remember my mother and her sisters, talking about it. Somebody first getting divorced, and my first cousin to get divorced. It was just an awful thing. That seems to me it's changed that attitude towards divorce.
I think that's a reflection of society at large.
Maybe the Jewish attitude is any different, or it's just part of the same societal?
We're human beings, and as we become more accepting or more used to divorce as a fact of life, Jewish divorce follows.
What about the differences between a Jewish divorce and a civil divorce?
Well, civil divorce is obviously done through the courts, and there's a lot of bickering over property and visitation rights if there are children, etc. A Jewish divorce is really a ritual which confirms the divorce has happened, that the couple is separating. Usually the property questions and visitation questions have all been settled by the civil courts.
Can they actually be done as part of the Jewish divorce? I've never seen that, actually.
No,
but
I don't. Well, I think it has to do with the law of the land in the United States. I don't think a Jewish divorce would be accepted as a civil divorce. I don't think it would hold up in court as a legal separation. Israel's a whole different story. In the marriage contract, what we call the ketubah, very often it'll be very detailed as to who gets what from the beginning of the marriage, and if they divorce, who gets what at the end of the marriage.
The ketubah is much more like a prenuptial agreement here, then, in Israel?
Well, it's a contract which outlines the responsibilities of the husband and the wife to and for each other.
Oh. I should go back and read my ketubah then.
Well, most people in the United States use a very formal, just a form document. It's easier that way.
Actually, I think it's somewhat of an art form, too. That we're going to get a little maybe more into Jewish marriage later, but I think the ketubah is an interesting thing. Actually, my marriage certificate, when we got married, the civil one was lost, and so my ketubah was actually recorded on the land records because they couldn't find the civil one. So
if you read through it, you'd be very surprised. It really is a legal document, and it punctures the balloon of romantic love.
Although actually, it's not in Hebrew, it's
in Aramaic, which is the land of the vernaculars of the time when it emerged, because it was meant to be understood. No secrets. Right from the beginning.
What I find in a lot of the divorce cases we handle, they're very often an intermarried couple, different issues that come up. Sometimes those issues are sort of not taken too seriously when the couple gets married, but all of a sudden when they're getting divorced, there's issues now with children in terms of bar mitzvahs and weddings and which kind of religious education the child's getting. What's your experience with couples now and dealing with some of those very emotional issues? And it seems to me religion for a lot of couples is a very innate, part of them. It's just hard, you've grown up, just the songs you've heard and growing up and things like that all be very difficult. So all those kind of issues come back, it seems to me, when you're getting divorced.
Well, you have to look back to when people were getting married. And I tell the students in my confirmation class, my 10th graders, that there are two things they should never get married for. One is romantic love. The other is sex, because they're going to be disappointed by both. However, if they strive,
let's repeat that one.
If they strive